All right, let's get right into it. There is nothing quite like that sinking feeling when your website or your app just vanishes from the internet. It is super frustrating, I know, but the fix is almost always way simpler than you think. So today, we're going to walk through the exact steps to figure out the most common Amazon Route 53 problems and get you back online, and fast.
So you type in your domain, you hit enter, and you get nothing. Or even worse, you get a big, scary error message. Yeah, that feeling of dread is totally real. But here's the good news. This almost always points to a really simple little misconfiguration that just needs a quick fix. We're going to find it.
So the most important thing right now is don't panic. Seriously, the vast majority of these problems fall into just a few buckets. So let's diagnose what's going on and pinpoint the exact steps to get your traffic flowing where it's supposed to go.
Okay, first things first. Let's tackle the most obvious problem. Your domain is just completely unavailable. This is square one for our troubleshooting.
You know, the surprising thing is that probably 90% of the time your domain goes dark, it's for one of these four reasons. It's usually a simple verification email that got lost, your name servers are pointing to the wrong place, someone accidentally deleted a hosted zone, or you've got a formal suspension. Let's dig into that last one, client hold. It sounds really serious, doesn't it? But really, it's just a status code that the powers that be, ICANN, they require when something needs your attention. You can think of it like a temporary pause button, usually because they need to confirm you are who you say you are, or maybe there was a billing problem. The most important thing to know is that it's totally reversible.
And that leads us to the number one cause of client hold, a missed verification email. It's so common. When you register a domain or you change your contact info, ICANN sends out a confirmation link. If you don't click it in time, boom, they suspend the domain. The fix is easy. Go find that email, check your spam, or just log into your Route 53 console and have it resent.
Before we go any further, let's clear up something that trips up so many people. Think of it like this. Your domain registration is like owning the street address for your house. It just proves you own it. The DNS service, on the other hand, that's the GPS that actually tells all the traffic how to get to your front door. You can own the address with one company but use a completely different GPS service. They are two separate things.
Now, understanding that difference is absolutely critical when we start talking about our second topic, why domain transfers fail.
A failed transfer is so frustrating, but the reason is almost always one of these usual suspects. First, most registrars lock your domain by default. To prevent theft, you have to go in and manually unlock it. Then, the authorization code they give you, that can expire. And yep, just like with registration, there's another authorization email you have to click to approve the move.
And then there's this number, 60 days. This is a big one. ICANN has a hard rule. You cannot transfer a domain for 60 days after you first register it or after you change the main contact information. This is a non-negotiable rule to stop fraud, so you just have to know about it and plan your transfers around it.
So, before you even think about starting a transfer, just run through this little pre-flight check. Is the domain unlocked? Is my auth code fresh? Can I actually get into the email account to approve the transfer? And am I past that 60-day window? If you can say yes to these four things, you'll avoid almost every single transfer problem.
Okay, let's move on to our third section. So, your domain's online, your transfer went through, but you just made a change. Maybe you pointed your website to a new server and nothing's happening. Well, my friend, welcome to the DNS waiting game.
The reason your changes are not instant is because of a little thing called TTL, which stands for time to live. Every single DNS record has a TTL value, and it's basically an expiration date. It tells servers all around the world, hey, remember this IP address for, say, the next 24 hours. And until that time is up, they won't even bother asking for your new information.
And this timeline really puts it all into perspective. When you make a big change, like switching your name servers over to Route 53, it can take up to 48 hours for that new information to spread across the entire internet. So the biggest takeaway here is patience. Your change isn't broken, the internet is just taking its time to catch up. We call this propagation. Now, if you're still staring at a server not found error after 48 hours, it's time to run this three-step check. First, did you actually create the record you needed, like an A record for your www subdomain? Second, is the value in that record exactly right? A single typo will break the whole thing. And third, and this happens more than you'd think, is the actual server you're pointing to even turned on and running?
Lastly, let's quickly touch on a couple of account and billing things that can cause some confusion, starting with what happens if your AWS account gets closed.
This timeline shows there's an important grace period. If your AWS account is closed, you don't lose your domain right away. You'll get notifications and the domain gets suspended. For domains registered with Amazon, there's a 30-day window before it's actually deleted. But be careful, after 90 days, that account closure is permanent.
And just a super quick note on billing. If you ever see 2 charges for a hosted zone on one bill, don't worry, it's probably not an error. If you create a zone on the very last day of the month, its charge can sometimes spill over onto the next month's bill. It's really just a quirky result of how billing cycles work.
So, let's wrap this all up into one simple checklist. First and foremost, always check your email for those critical verification links. For transfers, remember to unlock and get a fresh code. When you make DNS changes, just be patient. And finally, always double-check your settings. Whether it's the IP address in a record or just making sure you're editing the right hosted zone. Accuracy is everything.
And that really brings us to the final thought. After seeing how a few of these small oversights can cause some pretty big headaches, what's the one DNS check that you're going to make sure you never skip again? Because making that a habit is really the best way to keep your site online for good.